bad the shot was. And see, that's the difference between surrounding yourself with godly men and worldly men. Now, we have to be in the world. And I think it's good that we're there because I think people notice those things. So surround yourself with godly men, which is what these guys were doing here. And like a bunch of typical fishermen, one of them says, let's go. And what do? They all pile in. Let's go. So this is what they decided to do. They all got in when Peter made the invitation. But look at 3b. It says, so they went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Now you got to remember, this is a bunch of professional fishermen. These are guys who fished for a living. And they went out and they fished all night long and they caught nothing. Now, as I read this and thought about it, I thought, you know what? How many times are we doing something that we're supposed to be doing and it doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to turn out? We're unsuccessful. But now we'll have to finish the rest of the story to know what happens here. They didn't catch anything, but in verse 4, it says, early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. Now, as I thought about that, I thought, my goodness, they've just spent the last 2 or 3 years of their life with this man, and he's standing on the bank, and they're looking at him, and they don't know it's him. But then I thought, well, the story goes on later on. It says they were about 100 yards away. Of course, they had fished all night. I'm sure they were tired. It could have been foggy. I mean, any number of things could have happened. But I think a lot of times we're in the midst of whatever it is we're doing, and we're not looking for Jesus either. And guess where Jesus is? He's always there. He's always nearby. He's always waiting on us to recognize him and recognize that we need him. So in verse 5, this was a very unusual question. Verse 5 says, and Jesus speaking says, he called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. Well, this is Jesus. Do you not think he already knew they didn't have any fish? So he's asking this question simply to get them to admit they really do need him. They really do need Jesus. But in looking at verse 6, this is what he said. Throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Now, in thinking about this, I thought, well, now, if you fished all night and you're dead tired and you're a professional fisherman, you know it's not happening, and you look out here and there's somebody standing on the bank just says, well, throw it over there and you'll catch some. The logical thing would be to say, I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. It's not going to happen. But they didn't give up. And this is something I think that in times like we're in right now, we don't need to quit. We don't need to give up. So they thought, well, what'll hurt? We'll throw the net over here. And of course, when they did, they got a net full of fish. All right, let's look at verse 7. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. Now, you have to remember here, this is John writing this story. This is his gospel. And he did refer to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. And I thought to myself, why don't we all say that? Aren't we all loved by Jesus? He loves each and every one of us the same. I mean, he loves us as much as he loved John, but John recognized it. He realized he was loved by Jesus. And so he says, it is the Lord. Now see, he realized at the moment the miracle happened, when he saw something that just wasn't possible, they had fished all night long, had caught nothing, all of a sudden they've got a net full of fish, he realizes it's only by the grace of God. It's through the Lord's help. And so he recognized this. And the next part is probably the most troublesome part of this verse because I really can't understand it. But it says, as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. Now, in the King James Version, it says he was naked. Now, I don't know about that. I don't know why. And I guess I don't question it, but he put some clothes on, And just like Peter always does, he jumped in. Now, you know, Peter's been known to do this before, because during the storm, what did he do when the Lord called to him? He stepped out. And when he stepped out, he was able to walk on water as long as he kept his eyes on Jesus. And here, he realizes it's the Lord again. So what does he do? He jumps out of this boat. And he jumps out of the boat, and in verse 8, let's look at 8 through 10. In verse 8, it says, the other disciples followed in the boat, which was more logical, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they had landed, they saw a fire of burning coals, there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have just caught. Now, in thinking about these verses, these guys did have a net full of fish, but Jesus already had fish. And we know the story that's happened a couple of times before in other miracles. When Jesus had a couple of fish and a little bread, what was he able to do? He could feed thousands. Well, surely with what he had there, he could feed 7 more. He didn't really need their fish. He didn't have to have their fish. So why did he ask for it? I think for the same reason he asked us. He wanted us to be a part of it. He wanted these disciples to realize he was there for them and he could use what they had. And so many times I think people fail to accept God's call because they think what they do is not important. And I think sometimes with our kids, we might make the same mistake. But verse 11 is where this story is actually the fish story. And I know I've got some fishermen in here. You know, I know that Tony and Gary and a few other guys are here that are semi-pro fishermen. But these guys in verse 11, it says, Simon Peter climbed aboard and dragged the net ashore. And I noticed he got back in to do what the others evidently didn't do and got the net on shore. Said it was full of large fish. Not just fish, but large fish. 153. Now, I fished almost all my life, and I'd say I probably haven't caught 153 large fish in all of my life. And these guys caught them in one night. In one night, they had 153 large fish. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Now, and I think that's important to realize, why did it have to be so many fish? Why did it have to be so big? Because I think it was a message to them, everything's possible through him. I'll give you whatever it is you're looking for. Now, in verse 12, verses 12 through 14, it said, Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Well, none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. And again, I think Jesus asking for their fish just proves the fact he wanted to use what they had. And I also think it proves the fact he wants to use what we have to offer as well. So as we look at this fish story, I want to try to focus on 3 main points here. And the first one is, why did Jesus appear again? He had already appeared to them twice. They had already seen him. They knew he was alive. Why the third time? I think that he knew he needed to be there for his disciples. And I think as godly fathers, we need to be there for our children. Once or twice may not be enough. We may have to go many more times. But we've got to be there when they need us. So they needed him to be there for their confidence. They needed that boost of confidence. And they had that close personal relationship with Jesus, which I think is what we need if we're going to be there for our kids. I think that